Hi, welcome to the fourth weekly reflection episode. And this time I was planning on talking actually about one of the things which we announced or unannounced, which we went public with during the week, which was that we actually closed down Social Business Lab, which is one of the projects I've been involved in during the last 5 years. And this is a project which is about social integration or social projects in different ways. And I was thinking I can talk a little bit about both lessons learned from that, how it all started, and also how is it with being a foreigner in Sweden in general, and with the refugee situation that it was 2015 and stuff like that. So we'll see how this goes, this episode, and how long it will be. But I think it will be very interesting. And I can just start with saying that one of the main realizations with all those kind of social projects, especially focused on integration, is just like the Swedish labor market and how does it actually work to get a job as a foreigner in Sweden. And I mean, I myself, I'm a kind of a foreigner, so I'm born abroad, but I've grown up. I've went to most of the elementary school in Sweden, and I've a lot of Swedish friends and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit in between countries in that sense. So mostly Swedish, but a little bit German as well. And German and Sweden isn't that far apart cultural wise. There's differences, but not huge differences. And one of the realizations is in Sweden you really you hire people through your network, and that has a lot of effect on the labor market and how easy or hard especially it is to get into the labor market. So this network thing is as a foreigner, I think most foreigners who are in Sweden have realized this, but I think most Swedes don't really have realized this, and most foreigners don't really know why that is the case either. So just to give you an example, I think the numbers are 8 out of 10 jobs are hired through network. And when people say through network, they don't really mean it's somebody the person knows, but it's often somebody the person knows. So it's like a second degree network effect in that sense. So when you hire somebody, it's not that you yourself know that person, but you have somebody who knows that person, who can vouch for the person, etc. And this is quite strange in a lot of ways, and it has huge benefits, but also big drawbacks. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of years. And as a foreigner, you realize this, but you don't really know why, for example, it is like this. So, and I would say now, based on what I've seen and what I've experienced myself, and I'm an employer. I employ a lot of people, and I've hired a lot of people. What's at work here is basically two different things. So one of the things which is at work is that Sweden is a really high trust society. You trust each other a lot, and that's really good for a lot of things, and it makes a lot of things very smooth. But it also creates these kind of issues and these kind of problems. And why Sweden is a high trust society, I don't know if anybody really knows, but when you dig into it a little bit, then it's probably the background. It's in the north, all the Scandinavian countries are very trustworthy towards each other. And you needed that when you if you were a farmer 200 years ago, you needed to trust people around you, because otherwise you would simply starve. And that's a problem which isn't the same if you live in a warmer climate, for example, where you can maybe just get food wherever you want to, more or less, because it just grows around you. So you don't need to have the same level of trust. So really high trust between people in the Nordics. And that creates problem, because if I hire somebody, I want to trust that person. And that means that I can't just hire anybody. And trust takes time. That's a big problem here. That's why it takes time for foreigners to be integrated into the Swedish labor market, because it's not that I need to trust somebody, but I need my reference person to trust that person. And it's the same as somebody asks me. If somebody asks me for Carsten, can you recommend somebody for this job? I will recommend people I know will do a good job. I will not recommend people who I don't trust will do a good job. So it takes time to build this trust. You need to kind of prove yourself, or you need to kind of show that I have the right kind of capabilities, or I have the right kind of attitude towards it. And that takes time, because people need to see that, and trust is not just something you can say, oh, you can trust me, but it's something you actually need to see over time. Okay, we've known each other for 1 year, and you seem as decent now as you seemed 1 year ago. Okay, then that's good. Then I can start to trust you. But this is long time, very complicated for that reason. And the other reason it's hard to get into the labor market is that it's actually, I would say, based on the law system and how it works. In Sweden, there's something called laws, LAS, which stands for I think Lagen om anställningsskydd or something around that, which means like the law for labor protection. And that means that in Sweden it's kind of hard to fire somebody. It's not impossible. It's definitely possible to fire people, but it's kind of hard. And this means that whenever somebody hires somebody, they want to make sure it's the right person. You want to hire the right person. You don't want to hire somebody and say, that didn't really work out. Okay, find a new one. And these two together, the high trust and that you cannot easily fire people, means that you really need to prove yourself in order to get a job. And that's why it's through the network you recruit, because it's so much easier for me to trust somebody if somebody else vouches for that person. If I'm asking somebody, I need a new marketing manager for my company, and then I'll ask, and if somebody around me says, I had this person who worked for me before, really great person, then I'll be like, okay, good, very probable candidate. Of course, I'll look at other candidates as well, but that will make a big difference if somebody around me says, yes, this is a good person or not. So yeah, very big issue in Sweden with how the labor market works, integration. But okay, that's kind of the starting point for Social Business Lab and what we did over the years. And I'm just to briefly tell a little bit about Social Business Lab. It all started actually in almost 4 years ago now, in the fall of 2015 when we had the refugee situation. And it actually started with me and Don kind of this is something we should be engaged in. This is something we should do something about. And it's actually started by Don asking Cecilia Lawson, a friend of ours, who I started the company Rescued Fruit with. So he actually asked her because she was politically active locally, and he asked her why don't the politicians do anything? Why don't the politicians say, we have this situation now, we have a crisis, can't everybody just get together and try to solve this? And she's kind of answered back why don't you do something? And that's one of the big realizations actually about everything regarding this. That's very true. If we want to improve society, why should somebody else be responsible for that? Why am not I myself responsible for improving society? That was kind of an eye-opener, just that actually comment. But it's very important to have that in mind, I think. If you see something is wrong, don't expect somebody else to fix it. Ask, what can you do to fix it in one way or another? So this actually became the starting point for us to actually do something. So we were like, okay, we could actually call to a kind of crisis meeting and this is a situation. How does it work? So we did that. We used our network, and the first problem was that we ourselves didn't know how it worked. How many people were coming? How does it work with Migrationsverket? All this, we had no idea. So we were we just actually called for a meeting and invited people, and this was called Näringslivsuppropet, a call to action from the business society. And we just had an evening together and invited Migrationsverket, Arbetsförmedlingen, and other official roles or official representatives to kind of just explain to the business owners who came to the meeting, this is what happens now, this is how it works. And that was kind of the kickoff for everything, which was a very interesting meeting. It gave a lot of insights, and I think a lot of people learned a lot of things, which is just they as a business owner, we've never been in contact with this part of society. So I think a lot of people learned a lot through that. Then we kind of ask ourselves the question: what can we do? What can we contribute with? And we realized we're quite good at starting businesses. That's kind of what both me and Don, that's kind of what we have done over the last decade. So we were okay, we could help others start businesses, and that's probably quite good, because if people who are foreigners come here and start a business, they might actually be the best to hire the people who also are foreigners, because as I just talked about with the network effect, there's the most if you're a foreigner, you have the easiest way to actually know if another person who's also a foreigner is a good fit for a job or not. So we're we should help people start companies if they're foreigners. And then we ask ourselves, though, of those who come here, has anybody of them maybe already had a business? Because that's why wouldn't not they not have had a business before, for example? So we actually went and talked to somebody at Arbetsförmedlingen, hi, do you, amongst the people you talk to, have people who've run a business before? And she said, yeah. And we were can't we just meet 5 of them or something like that? So we had a meeting with 5 of them, and that was a really interesting meeting. It was also kind of an eye-opener, because there's 2 things happening. One, we met people who had run a business before. This was end of 2015, so mostly people from Syria, who had come here maybe the last 1-2 years before that. And of course, they had run all kinds of different businesses, which was one of the eye-openers in that sense. Like, yeah, of course it's not so simple. Of course it's not that they all run one kind of business. No, one had had a law firm. He had started a law firm. One had a retail shop. One had a clothing factory. One had a local grocery store. Like normal businesses, of course. It's very spread out. It's very wide. So the realization here was that, yeah, of course, like there's a lot of people coming here and they don't have one profile. They have a lot of different profiles. And I would even say so profiles between people in that group is bigger a difference than it is between us and certain people in that group. So that was a big realization. And the other realization is that we asked them, are you planning, would you be interested in starting a business in Sweden? And most said yes. And then we were like, would you be interested in talking to us further about things? And they said no, which was like, this didn't really go as planned. But then we realized that one of the things they actually all mentioned was that they have a problem with the language. Like one of the biggest barriers when we asked the question, why haven't you already started a business? The answer we always got was, don't really know the language yet. I don't feel comfortable in the language. We, however, kind of read into the situation. It was not just the language. It was actually also all kind of things which everybody thinks is hard when you start a business, which is, for example, network. Like you don't know where to find certain information. You don't know how do I lease a facility? If I want to buy these kind of machines, how does that work? If I want to import things, how does that work? Like there's so many like small practical questions which you just don't know whom to ask, so to say. And in Sweden, like when I started my business, what you do is you ask people. You build a network. You ask other entrepreneurs, and when you ask them, they will tell you, "Nah, this is not important. Don't care about this." Or you're like, "Yeah, but I know some people over there. They can manage that with you, etc." So network super important when you start a business because there's just so many details. So we kind of realized, okay, they said language was a problem, but we kind of think knowledge or network is a problem. So we actually made an initiative which we called Språkcafé för företagare, which means like a language cafe for business owners. And we invited people to that that was like every second week, I think we made it, and it was like 1-2 hours, sit down, talk in Swedish as much as possible about running a business, or if you have questions about starting a business, all those kind of things. So it was kind of a group coaching session. Instead of us meeting one person at a time, or me meeting one person at a time, we could be 5 or 10 or 15 people. If we were too many, we divided into smaller group of maybe 5 or 8 or so, and just help each other. And that also taught people a lot, because then suddenly people learn from others' questions and others' problems, etc. And this we did for quite a while, like 2-3 years almost, I think, with varied effect. Like sometimes it was a lot of people, sometimes there were few people. It was very obvious that people were there either they didn't like it or they got enough information out of it to not come back. We don't really know for sure, and both probably. Or they were there maybe like 5 or 8 times or something like that, and then they kind of dropped off. And that's most of the time because then they felt like I've learned enough. It's not super important. It's nice, but it's not super important for me anymore. So they don't prioritize it high enough. But that was like one of the projects we did with what became Social Business Lab after that. And we've done other things as well with Social Business Lab, but the main focus has always been like, as in the name, it's about social business and it's a lab. So it was a lot about experimenting. Okay, can we do this? Is this needed? And our business model, if we would say it like that, it was kind of like, okay, can we do certain projects with margin or with profit, and then you use that to do other projects where, for example, there is no margin or nobody's willing to pay for it. So over all those years we've done Social Business Lab, we've done a lot of different things. We started education for front-end development aimed at komvux level, which is after high school, after gymnasium, which was one of the things we kind of thought, like, wait, we will have a problem in the future of a lot of people will have a hard time getting jobs. So either we get a lot of people to start companies so that they can hire people. That was kind of the Språkcafé initiative. Or we give them knowledge which will make it easy for them to get hired. And that was kind of like, what knowledge is required which is easy to get hired? And we were like, okay, if you become a developer, that's kind of easy to get hired and it's in high demand. And there's other jobs which also are in high demand, but the beauty with developer is that there's no certificate in that sense. Like if you want to become a teacher, where there also is a high demand, you need to get a certain education, and you need to get a lärarlegitimation. You need to be a certified teacher in order to become a teacher. But if you're a developer, you just need to be a good developer, and you'll get a job. No question about that. So we were like, we should get more people to become developers. And we want especially people who are maybe far away from becoming a developer now to become developers. So that means not middle income kids because their parents are developers. Those will have a very close to become developers themselves. So that's why we started it together with Convux, because then we had a reach towards people who maybe had never really thought about themselves as potential developers or something like that. So that was a project we did with Helsingborg Stad for over 2 years, which was a fantastic initiative. It was fantastically positive that they actually said, okay, we'll do this. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it. It doesn't exist anymore now. I think the last batch is currently ending. And that's sad, of course, from my perspective, but we just couldn't find a way to continue it in a good way. But that's kind of Social Business Lab in a nutshell. We tried a lot of things. We wanted to do as much good things as possible. There's been a lot of people involved in it over the years. It was never big. It was never big. It was like 1, 2, 3 people involved. Most people worked part-time with it in one way or another. The only people who worked more has been Alexandra and Kalle, who kind of like, okay, actually became main coordinators in that sense. But it's been very fun, and it's sad that it's ending. However, it's also like you can't force certain things, and the timing with a lot of different things now just made it so that it was the easiest way forward was to actually say, okay, we will not do anything, at least not in the near future. Doesn't mean we won't do anything further along the road. I'm always open for doing things, so it might definitely be that it goes in another direction. But at the current phase, we realized it might be the best to actually just also tell the world, or not the world, but tell those around us, like, now Social Business Lab doesn't do any further activity. There's nothing planned for 2020. But if you're interested in what we did, go to socialbusinesslab.se, and there's also different what we call lab rapporter, so different like what kind of projects have we done? What have we learned from it? We haven't been able to do that for everything, but for some of the things we've done, we've done that, and I really enjoy that. So yeah, thank you for listening.